Okay, so I'm gonna be speaking about the Rachmaninoff Prelude in D major, and I'm gonna be doing a form and an analysis of this prelude. So I found that the large form of this prelude is a theme and variations. So there are three variations in this theme. Um, the four big sections of this piece are very similar. That's what led me to believe that it isn't a theme and variations. The three sections that follow the theme essentially are pretty much structured in the same way, even have a lot of the same things, just minor alterations, and that's why I thought it was a theme and variations. I also found that for in each theme and variation, there is a hybrid of a CBI followed by a consequent, so like a hybrid. And there is also a two measure prefix that comes before the theme, obviously, and it ends with a five measure suffix. Okay, so now on to the main motives of this piece. So I found that the main motive of this whole prelude is that of a half note followed by a quarter note and back to another half note, pretty much going bum bum bum, and you can pretty much hear this motive throughout the whole prelude, and I mean, little alterations here and there, but it's almost the same thing. So there's a two measure prefix to start off, like we said earlier, and that prefix is just the left hand, everything in the bass clef, and it's triplets, a triplet feeling for every beat, and there's some pretty huge leaps in the triplets, which maybe because he had big hands, he wrote it. It just it feels like the composer wants to go somewhere because of the leaps, but it feels hesitant about it because it's not going in any certain direction. It's not going stepwise either down or up. It's just jumping to different places. So that's why I think he's hesitant about where he wants to go. Now, in the melody, we have, like I said, the main motive of in measure three, the half note going to the quarter note and then back up to the half note. Now, after the quarter note, it goes back to the first, like the same note that it was in the first half note. So it's kind of like staying home, not really going anywhere, just returning to where you are. So kind of conservative there. Okay, so then after the prefix, we're gonna look now at the phrase structure of this. So after the prefix, there's a basic idea that is four measures long. It consists of the main motive and then a little different version of the motive. So there's that, and then there's a four measure contrasting idea, which is kind of like the basic idea, just a little different. Instead of starting with that first half note F, you start on a half note G, go down to a quarter note F, sharp, and then going to G again. So it's like the main thing, just a step off, and like different harmony. So that's a contrasting idea. Then we have a consequent, which is comprised of another four measure basic idea and a four measure contrasting idea, which makes it eight measures, and it's kind of like a repetition of the CBI, except it ends with a cadence. So we don't get the real cadence until measure 18, which is a PAC. But Rachmaninoff does try and like give a sense that there's a little cadence like by measure 15 in a six chord. So he's being deceptive in a way, but no, the real cadence is at measure 18. Okay, so now we're gonna be talking about variation one, which by the picture you can see, looks quite different from the theme. Okay, so for variation one, it starts off very softly with a pianissimo dynamic, but you can see the motive is still there. The half note going to quarter note back to half note. You see that's all still there. Except the only difference is that instead of having the triplets in the bass, we now have them in the treble clef being played with the right hand. They're kind of just floating above the main motive, and instead of being in huge leaps, they're now in stepwise motion. they're not really going anywhere, more just like floating there, but it's something completely different. And then in the bass, instead of having the triplets now, since they left to the treble clef, we have eighth notes that seem to be arpeggiating, you know, the chord that it's part of the measure. So it's something different. And just like in the theme, the phrase structure obviously is very similar in this variation. It's comprised of that eight measure CBI, with the basic idea, contrasting idea, and it is followed by eight measures of the consequent. So that's exactly the same. And here you can start hearing a lot of modal mixture being implemented by Rachmaninoff. Sometimes it makes you wonder if the piece like switched to the parallel minor, which is D minor, and but no, you're still in D major. It just sounds like there's a lot of different stuff going on, and I mean, tonality wise. So now we're gonna be talking about variation number two, which again, something completely different, but you still get the sense that the theme is there, just altered. Okay, so in this variation, the triplet motive returns to the left hand in the bass, and then leaves the right hand. Now in the right hand, instead of having the half note to quarter note back to half note, we create more of eighth note feelings, but it's still the motive is still there, just made in eighth notes. And then again, phrase structure pretty similar. You have the eight measure CBI, and then it would be followed by eight measures of the consequent, with the only exception being that after measure 50, or which is the last measure of the consequent, you add two more measures, so it's kind of being stretched a little bit, and we'll go into this a little bit later. And again, you can hear a lot of modal mixture that is occurring in the variation. You can see and listen to a lot of B flats that are being in the melody and even in the bass. And it makes you think that it might be in minor because of the B flats, right? But then you see there's still a lot of F sharps, so it's a pretty clear indication that we're still in D major. So I feel that in this variation number two, this is where everything reaches its climax, at least on this piece. So it feels like everything is building up towards measure 50 and beyond. And a clear indication of that could be that, three measures before that, there's, you're at pianissimo, and then it just starts crescendoing up. So dynamic increases, that's part of the climax. There's also the fact that the melody is increasing kind of stepwise and all the way up to a higher register. And then once you get to measure 50, you get an octave sign. So it means you have to take the melody up an octave. And so you do technically reach the climax of at least register, which signals the climax of the piece, the highest point of it. And you can just feel and listen to all the tension building up until you reach to that exact moment. And then that's why they had to expand measure 50, because in measure 51, that's when you completely reach the climax, the highest point of everything. And it's marked fortissimo. All the eighth notes are marked with accents. So, just to really emphasize that you reached the point. You're at the top. And then in measure 52, it starts decreasing. The dynamic is diminuendo. So everything is decreasing. The melody is going down by step. So you're slowly like decreasing, and you got to the climax, and now you're coming off of it. And then, first beat of measure 53, you reach the PAC, which means that we're on to a different variation. Okay, so now for variation number three, it just came off of a huge climax and, the main point of this prelude. So it's gonna be a little bit different. It starts soft, and then you have to. So you get the main motive back, the half note, followed by the quarter note back to half note. And the triplet feeling is still in the bass, so that's similar to, the theme and variation number one. So that's still there. But then when you hear the first half note of the melody and the motive, a half beat later it is like echoed by a dotted quarter note a couple steps off. And then when you get to the quarter note, you hear an eighth note that is also that is echoing the quarter note, and that whole thing repeats throughout the end of the piece. So it's really an echo pattern that is following all this. That's the main variation of this, and there's many reasons why this could be happening. So I did a lot of research on Rachmaninoff before this, and I found out that before he composed these preludes, this is a part of 10 preludes that he composed. This is number 4. And so I found out that he was very depressed for many years, and coming off of that depression, he composed these preludes. So it sounds to me like you can feel all of his sadness and longing and emotions on this prelude. Like that's why the beginning is, starting off soft with the triplets. Like it's trying to start something like driving matter, like trying to start a car, trying to start back your life again. So that's why I think the echoes are there, and because you reach your climax before in variation number 2, you reach the highest point in your life or the happiest point in your life, and it's like, okay, now what? Now you can't stay up there, so everything goes back down again, and it's like life, like reminding you constantly with the echoes that, hey, like, it's gonna be okay, or maybe like, you're just longing to find some stability or some closure. That I think that's what the echoes represent. And yeah, and here, but you can see in the image all the echoes. You can see the half note followed by that dotted quarter note, and you can see the quarter note followed by an eighth note. Really cool idea with the echoes. I really like. So the phrase structure is, kind of similar to the theme here. Still, there are some differences, but again, the composer still tries to fool us with a deceptive cadence, just as he's done in every single variation. But that's not the real cadence. We have to wait till we get to the PAC. So there is still an 8 measure CBI, but instead of 8 measures of the consequent, it is stretched into 12. So we had 4 more until we can actually reach the PAC. This is just a form of stretching. So then once we reached the PAC, I guess Rachmaninoff decided that it wasn't a suitable enough ending. Just like life sometimes adds, or you think you're where you're supposed to be, but life is like, no, we still have a ways to go. I think that's kind of what Rachmaninoff was trying to do with this. So he adds a suffix of 5 measures, and I guess the only difference here is the echoes stop after the first measure of the suffix, and now it's just an eighth note melody that is just driving towards somewhere. And even the triplets on the bass, they're increasing in the range, so everything is kind of leading up to something again. And then you reach 3 measures before the end, you reach, like, I guess, a point of tension, a lot of tension. You reach a chord which is like over 3 beats long, three and a half beats long, and it's louder than anything you had done for the last couple measures. Before everything was in pianissimo, and it crescendoed up to mezzo forte until you reach that unstable chord, which is a 7 half diminished 6/5 of 5. So we hadn't had anything that long sustained the whole prelude, and now we finally have it, and it's kind of like building up into tension for 3.5 beats, and it wants to go to 5, and then you have a eighth rest and a very soft piano 5 chord with a 9/8 suspension that moves down on the last eighth note going into one. So I don't know. I think it's a very interesting way to end this. It just, you get all this tension for 3 beats, which feel like an eternity, only to have a really soft 5 find its way back into home. So it's kind of like life. You feel like you're done. You feel like things aren't getting better, and that's what I think is signified by the tension in that 7 half diminished 6/5 chord. It's life. All that tension building up, and then you take a breath. That's determined by the eighth rest, and you kind of find yourself again, and realize everything's gonna be fine. You can do this, and that's when you reach home. Very soft, the tonic. You finish with a PAC, and I just think it's a very beautiful ending, and I really enjoyed this. The way that Rachmaninoff was able to express all of his emotions and what he went through into this, I think was just very beautiful. And well, that's it for this presentation.